Lewis Howes is a podcaster, a New York Times best-selling author, and he's even been on The Ellen Show. In this video, I'm going to look into his human design to see what it takes to build success like him. Back in 2015, Lewis had been running his School of Greatness podcast for a couple of years, and it had been going really well. The podcast was getting over 1 million downloads a year, and things were really picking up for him. One of the books that changed Lewis's life was The 4-Hour Workweek. So Lewis reached out to Tim Ferriss to bring him onto the podcast. Hey Lewis, will you come on the School of Greatness? No, why should I? You see, Tim Ferriss was already a much bigger star than Lewis. The 4-Hour Workweek had come out years earlier, and Tim didn't see the point of going on a small podcast like the School of Greatness back then. But Lewis didn't give up. What Tim didn't know is that a while before Lewis had got in touch, he'd been at a networking event where he'd met the head of the Apple podcast team. He'd been building and nurturing that relationship with the Apple podcast team, knowing that one day he could call in a favour. Hey Tim, if you come on School of Greatness, I can guarantee you'll get featured podcast on Apple. Now, that's great exposure, even for someone like Tim Ferriss. And so Tim said, how soon can you get me on the show? That interview was a turning point for Lewis because it meant he could get bigger and bigger guests on the show. And obviously, he's never looked back since, because the School of Greatness has well over 500 million downloads now. But Lewis didn't start out being a well-connected entrepreneur. Rewind to 2007, and his growing American football career meant that he was a professional player. Granted, he was only getting paid $250 a week, but he was on his way to doing really well. But as Lewis is finding ways to spend his $250 every week, he gets a really bad injury to his wrist, which effectively ends his career. Although to his credit and also sheer stamina, he played on for another 14 games before deciding to tell his boss about it. And before you say it wasn't serious, bear in mind that among the carnage in his wrist, the doctors told him he'd split one of his bones open. Dropping out of sport was a big deal for Lewis because he'd sacrificed so much to focus on being good at it. When he was 13, he had the reading skill of a 7-year-old. He really had no academic success to fall back on after his injury. And that's when he ended up living at his sister's place, sleeping on her sofa. But I always say that rock bottom is your friend because the only way is up. He spent most of his time on LinkedIn trying to find work, and that meant putting a lot of effort into his profile. In fact, his profile was so good that people would message him to ask his advice about how to improve their profiles. Lewis worked with one business owner for 30 minutes. The guy said, "This is amazing. It's going to change how many leads I get." And he paid Lewis $100 for it. Lewis thought, $100 for half an hour? This is good money. So he kept at it. And soon he was earning $200. And then $300. That's when he started to think, this is amazing. I'm making more money than I ever was in sport. But he realized he was selling his time for money, which isn't scalable. So he started creating courses. He started running networking events. And a massive moment of realization came when he did his first webinar and made $6,200 for an hour of work. That felt like real money to him. And he went all in for the next few years until he's making 7 figures a year for the business. But it was getting tiring. He was doing a lot of webinars. So in 2013, that's when he started the School of Greatness podcast. He was self-taught in marketing and he was doing something right because in the first 6 months, he gets 750,000 downloads. While all this external success is going on, Lewis has a lot going on in his inner life too. Not least a moment where he gets into a violent fight in a basketball game where he beats someone violently and Lewis's best friend, seeing Lewis's Hulk side, disowns him. That's a wake-up call for him to address his anger issues and to find out why he wants to destroy people anyway. Well, it all comes out in a therapy session. Turns out, Lewis had repressed a memory of being raped by a babysitter when he was 5 years old. That goes a long way to explain why he went into a sport as aggressive as American football, where he was paid to be violent. But as this memory comes up, It's obviously a lot to deal with. He really struggles with telling friends and family. But when he does, it brings people closer to him. Over time, he realizes this is something he has to talk about on the podcast. But as a sportsman, he believes he's seen as the strong man, and it's going to really trigger his audience. Obviously, it's difficult for him to bring it up, but he puts the episode out one evening and tweets about it to his followers. He goes to bed with dread that when he wakes up, he'll be hit with loads of hate. When he wakes up the next day, he checks his phone, and the messages aren't hate. There's loads of messages from men saying how the same thing happened to them and how grateful they are for Lewis putting the episode out. Turns out 1 in 6 men suffer abuse like that. That's a turning point for Lewis because after that he feels much healthier inside. He connects with his guests much better and it drives him to go deeper in his interviews. As for School of Greatness, he's never looked back. Today, he doesn't just do the podcast where he interviews all sorts of guests to help his audience. He also writes books, including The School of Greatness, a #2 New York Times best-selling book along with several others. He has courses, he runs events and memberships. It's a powerful story of someone who just built bigger and bigger from doing people's LinkedIn profiles. It goes to show what you can do with compounding. So let's take a look at his chart and see the reasons for his success. First thing to say is about timing. I didn't have an exact birth time for Lewis. However, his chart doesn't change dramatically through the day. But based on his incarnation cross, which I'll get to, I'm going with midday birth time. That makes Lewis a manifesting generator, with all 4 motor centers defined. Not surprising for a sportsman to have consistent energy like that. He's a 4-6 profile with emotional authority. The 4-6 is known as the opportunist role model. The 4 line is conscious in him and is called the opportunist. The 6 line is unconscious and is called the role model. Lewis is someone who's built a successful career with the help of his relationships. And for someone who's a conscious 4 line, that makes perfect sense. When Lewis was lying on his sister's sofa at rock bottom, he was on LinkedIn trying to build his network. As he's grown, he'd go to events and find the journalists, the TV show producers, anyone with influence, and see how he could help them. He might put them in touch with a new contact or share an opportunity with them. His plan has always been to offer them so much value that by the time he needs a favour, they'd be more than happy to help. Getting Tim Ferriss as the featured show on Apple Podcasts is a classic example. 4 line's all about relationships. With the 4 line, you're going to be super friendly. And when you add that to the open and warm aura of a manifesting generator, people will love being around you as much as you'll love having people around you. It's no surprise that he ended up playing team sports like football and handball, where working with others and relationships is such a critical part of being successful. The 4 line is known as the opportunist, and that's because as you surround yourself with people and feel like you want to build relationships with them, they'll feel like they want to repay you and they'll bring you opportunities. That works great with a type like a manifesting generator, which is designed to respond to opportunities. Think about when Lewis was starting out with LinkedIn profiles. The people he worked with would send him more people to work with. Something interesting about Lewis is that he's talked openly in the past about how he's gone into relationships and given so much that he loses himself. That's sort of natural behavior for a 4 line because their friendliness wants to give as much as possible, and it'll be fine as long as they're getting something equal out of the relationship. Without that, they'll feel drained and it's time to move on. Lewis says the most important factor in his success is down to his relationships with his network. That's a 4 line working in perfect harmony. The 4 line is powerful, and on top of that, Lewis also has the gate 44 in the spleen. This is known as the gate of patterns. It's located in the spleen, so it's driven by intuition, and it gives you the ability to understand people and their needs. Obviously, that's going to be great when you're building a relationship with someone and helping them get to their goals. If you have this gate, it's going to make you a great HR manager, and it wouldn't surprise me if Lewis is a great person to work for. Lewis has a double activation for his gate 44, so it's important for him. Located in his sacral, he has gate 27, the gate of care. This activation is going to make you care deeply for people. In the case of building relationships, with this gate, You're going to genuinely want to help people because you care very much about doing whatever you can for them. Something super important with Gate 27 is you've got to remember that you can't help someone else if you're not taking care of yourself. Fill your own cup first. Before the School of Greatness podcast, Lewis spent years selling social media marketing courses. And he was making great money from it, 7 figures a year. But it wasn't what he loved doing. Nowadays, even though he's got multiple businesses, he focuses his time on interviewing because, as he says, that's what he loves doing the most. But why is that? You've already seen that he's warm and inviting because of being a sacral energy type. He's also a conscious 4 line, which means building relationships is a natural strength for him. He also has an undefined and totally open head center. So with an open head, you'll want to be absorbing as much information from around you as possible. Whether he's interviewing Joe Dispenza about healing yourself or talking to Kobe Bryant about mindset, he'll be genuinely interested in hearing what they have to say. Lewis has the Gate 11 in his ajna, the Gate of Harmony. With Gate 11 activated, you're collecting ideas from all over the place, not necessarily connected in any way, until somehow you put all the ideas together in some larger insight. Could even be a new philosophy or religion. Also in his ajna, Lewis has Gate 24, the Gate of Returning. With this gate, you're always looking for solutions to problems, practical problems or esoteric, it doesn't matter. That'll make you want to go deep when talking to people to get to the bottom of all those questions. You've seen how he has Gate 44 in his spleen, the Gate of Patterns. This gives you an intuitive ability to understand people and what they need. This will really help connect with people and open them up. Lewis's interview with Kobe is one of the best Kobe ever did because he talked about things he'd never talked about with any other interviewer. Something Lewis often talks about is never giving up, how sticking with things has led to his success. When entrepreneurs are asked what it takes to be successful, 90% of the replies are based on never giving up. And in Lewis's case, I think this is a really important part of him. Only about a third of people have a defined will center. Some sources say it's as low as 12%, but Lewis has his will defined. The will center, or heart center as it's also called, is where you follow your dream. You go after what your heart desires. When it's defined, it means you'll never give up in pursuit of your goals. By itself, that would make Lewis highly determined. However, there's plenty more in his chart. Looking at his spleen to root, he has channel 2838. This is the channel of struggle. With this channel active, you're born to fight. This channel is the definition of never giving up. Once you've got a goal in your mind, you'll go after it with all you've got. That might look crazy to an outsider, especially when you'll happily sacrifice anything to achieve it. But the 28 in the spleen will give you an inner knowing that you'll make this happen. The struggles you face while working towards your goal will bring you real satisfaction because you're going to be learning all the time. Not only about how to get closer to your goal, but also learning about yourself. So it's a satisfying journey, not just a relentless battle. You'll also want to do everything in your own way, so it's no surprise that even when Lewis was down and out on his sister's sofa, and he had an interview lined up to work at a sports agency, he just didn't show up. Something to mention is that Lewis also has Gate 2, which is called the Gate of Higher Knowledge. This gate means you're not here to work for others because it exhausts you. Instead, you've got an inner knowing about which direction is going to lead to success, not only for yourself, but also for your community. And they'll be happy to follow you. And back to Lewis's determination. He's also got the 3536 channel. This connects the throat to the solar plexus and is called the channel of versatility. Trial and error when working towards your goals ultimately leads to a huge bank of knowledge and wisdom. You'll gain a deep understanding of the world through all of your experiences. At one end, the channel of versatility is made up of Gate 35 in the throat, the gate of progress. If you have this gate, you're going to want to try lots of different things, and you'll also do it just for the experience. So this gate isn't about thinking through things logically, it's about change and variety. Because it's in the throat, this gate is designed to help the community see new ways of doing things. Ultimately, it's all about bringing progress into the world. At the other end of the channel of versatility is gate 36, the gate of crisis. This is part of the solar plexus, and with this active, you learn by going through deep emotional crises. Initially, it's probably going to be painful having to deal with all that emotional trauma, but over time, you're going to develop skills for not only coping, but learning from these experiences. Over time, you're going to do way better than other people who might be completely derailed by going through similar things. And in Lewis, this gate is a quadruple activation, so it's definitely important for him. Which brings me on to the next thing that's made Lewis really successful. As horrible as it is, Lewis was abused as a kid. He was raped by his babysitter when he was 5. It's something he didn't talk about until later in life, but now Lewis talks about his gratitude for it happening, which is really amazing, because I don't think most people would be able to turn something like that into a positive. If you look at Lewis's incarnation cross, he's got the right angle cross of Eden, the 36-6, 11-12. This is all about starting out in life and feeling like things are great until something horrible happens. Actually, it's also possible that you feel the world is a harsh place to be in the first case, but in Lewis's case, he was brought up in a loving home environment. But with the right angle cross of Eden, you're focused on trying to get yourself back to your happy place. What you learn about yourself and the world while processing all this will bring you peace and possibly even happiness, and it'll also bring peace and happiness to your community too. When Lewis launched School of Greatness, it wasn't until he started talking about his abuse that the podcast really took off. Not only did it get much more attention, it turns out that 1 in 6 men are abused, so obviously his story resonated with people, but it made Lewis a much better interviewer. He wasn't so distracted with internal anger, and instead he was able to connect with guests on a much deeper level, and was also able to go deeper emotionally with them, which all made a better podcast as he got guests to open up in ways they hadn't before. If you think about his quadruple activated gate 36, it's horrible to think, but it's entirely possible that something awful was always going to happen to him so that he could help others through similar situations. I find it really interesting that this happened as Lewis was turning 30, because as a 6 line, his second stage of life would have been starting around then, moving from the trial and error phase of his first 30 years and going into a perspective shift as he entered the second phase of 30 to 50. Maybe that new perspective started off with a deeper understanding of himself and the people around him. He's a 4 line after all, so deep relationships for him are really important. The last thing I want to talk about is how Lewis turned out to be really good at business, especially considering he didn't even start to think about business until his sports career ended, and that wasn't until he was 24 years old. Lewis is a manifesting generator. As a manifesting generator, you're designed to respond. That means there has to be a need for something before you can act on it. It's not like being a manifestor who can initiate something completely new whenever they get the urge. So Lewis is designed to respond, and combined with his conscious 4 line, it means his network is going to bring him opportunities to respond to. Think back to when he was out with his injury and friends start coming to him to ask for help with their LinkedIn profiles. Then contacts from his network start coming to him for help, and he's earning great money, but sees the demand and recognises he can scale, so he managed to build it up into a 7-figure business. In fact, Sports Networker is still going and brings him money today. Looking at his solar plexus, he's got gate 49, the gate of revolution. With this gate, you know what your community needs to thrive. It doesn't matter if you need to break down existing ways of doing things. And if you look at his businesses, including the School of Greatness podcast, they're all about helping his audience be more successful in business. He says it's to help others have the kind of education that he never had at school. He's taking schooling into his own hands and using it to help his community. In his route, he's got gate 54, the gate of ambition. This gate means you have big ambitions and financial goals to match. It's known as the engine of business success, and in Lewis, this is double activated. He's also got gate 11, and with gate 11, you can be great at piecing together all the bits of experience and information you've had, and then be able to connect the dots to create some new insight. In Lewis's case, I think we're going to see some big things from him in the future. With his unconscious 6 line, I think Lewis is just getting started. I can't wait to see what happens as he goes into the 3rd phase of his 6 line in his 50s. Thanks for watching.